Ding dong, ding dong. Um, Coming on here. The last live I did turned out to be pretty popular, even though I'm kind of bored with that kind of information. It seems like a lot of people really need it. Um, so I'm going to come on here and, see if I can kind of follow up to that in a way that I feel good about, recognizing that that might not be possible for both me to feel good about the content I'm making and the public to actually want it. That's sort of like the big issue I'm in right now, thinking about retiring or retreating and don't necessarily know how. I'm working a lot in all the ways on that, spiritually, physically, materially. Um, so there's frameworks. We could call them view teachings. In the method that I learned and use, you have to pair methodology with view, because methodology alone can be used for any worldview and weaponized in any way. So even when you have some methods, you have to keep refreshing the view and making sure your view is correct. And correct, obviously, everyone's got their own truth and their own priorities, but just to be, very clear about the fact that, like, we as humans love to twist things to our leverage and advantage, and we love to dispose and make other people and other creatures disposable. That's the sort of the human issue in this crooked, twisted time that we're in. We're in a very twisted time, and some would say we're in the time where the clowns, the reversals, the reversers, the reversed people, the queer people, the trans people, they're the real teachers now. The clowns, the weirdos, because the culture is so backwards in some way, backwards, upside down, wrong-headed. So we have to kind of look at things a little differently, because what we see everywhere is not necessarily in harmony with the world, the planet, things like that. So I'm going to talk a little bit here about one framework that I use with clients, and that is to say, yes, I do see clients privately, and it's fraught because people want a miracle, and there's only so much you can do in one session to sort of help someone move a very chronic or ancestral pattern. But this is one of the frameworks I use, and so I'm going to spend the next maybe 30 to 60 minutes just talking about this one framework, knowing that is not every framework. It may not be applicable to your situation because you are not at the place where you can understand it, and that's totally fine. It's just on my mind lately, and I want to talk about it because I find it to be a very useful framework. But this does not fill in all the gaps. There's so much technical and experience, skill-based methods that go along with this kind of framework, but at least the framework is necessary. So the framework is sort of borrowed from Jean Gebser, who was an integral sort of philosopher out of Europe, hung out with like Sri Aurobindo and all these people. My version of it is not necessarily going to be the exact same that he used, but it's close enough so that I can say that it's kind of Gebserian in nature. However, as I talk about it, maybe it will become clear where the deviations are, or where I deviate from the sort of meta-modern people that are using this now. And I'm not necessarily looking to make fights or argue. I'm just saying this is what works for me as a mixed race, queer person from a diaspora who has no home, no family, and just is trying to sort of live and die in a good way. And this is one of the frameworks I've stumbled upon that seems to work when put into other frameworks. Again, have to do all these caveats because people want a miracle. I'm not peddling in miracles. This is about engagement and learning and, being a whole person. That's pretty much it. So the culture we're in is largely dominated by the mind or the mental rational, which is to say we like to explain things in abstract concepts and we like to dissociate. So you have to first understand that when the mind is given the hierarchical domination pattern to rule the body, it tends to abstract, it tends to dissociate. And it does that in order to protect you in some way. It's a protective mechanism to sort of get a vantage point and understand the world. And this process is not necessarily damaging, but it is damaging when it's the only process that we use, or that's the predominant process. So when I ask people what is going on with them, they will usually start by thinking about it and describing it in a mental, rational way. I'm suffering from anxiety and blah, blah, blah. Let's just take that for example. So anxiety is a concept. It tells me nothing of the actual symptoms that the person is describing or having. It tells me nothing of the relationship that they're dealing with. There's no context there. There's just this label that says I'm suffering from anxiety. So, and then they can explain why. I've had trauma when I was a kid. Again, trauma, another label, a dissociative abstraction. Intergenerational trauma, another dissociative abstraction. I'm using the mental, rational language right now to describe its own tendencies and downfalls. This is our primary way of talking to each other in the Western culture, is mental, rational, abstractive, conceptual, dissociative. The mind is the ruler. I think, therefore I am. This is the Descartesian fallacy, the trap of Descartes, This idea that the mind, the rational mind, is somehow better than the mind, the kind of thinking that came before. So I let people talk about this for a little while and I listen. I'm listening with more than just my mind, but they're primarily in their mind talking to me. Eventually, some things will light up for me in my system, and I will have enough initial information to ask some further questions and to get a little bit deeper. Let's just say it's deeper. At the beginning, it seems like you're digging. When you get to a certain part in the practice, you're no longer digging. Things are happening simultaneously or complementary to each other. They are in cooperation. But at the beginning, the mind is fighting for control and survival, and it wants to consolidate energy in the upper body in order to protect you. And so the first step is getting someone out of that state and distributing the energy back down. I'm using these, shorthands to describe a process that is not so simple. But generally speaking, I'm telling it to you accurately, okay? The next step down is the mythic. You could call it the imaginal, the symbolic. The dream that Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung were big into this level of perception. This level of thinking, the mythical thinking, the symbolic, the dreaming. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, women who run with the wolves, Gloria Anzaldúa, Chicanx, Latinx theater, all deals primarily with this form of perception. The symbolic, the sort of imagistic level, the symbolic, the imagistic, the collage level. You have to see it like art. It's this kind of imagistic, raw, symbolic kind of dream-like place. This is one level deeper than the mental. but it's still slightly abstractive and slightly dissociative. It's you from the energy or the relationship that you're witnessing via a kind of story or dream image, right? For a lot of people, they'll get to this place through something like Western shamanic journeying or lucid dreaming or something, and they'll kind of fall in love with it, and they'll stay here. And you don't really want to stay here, but you have to get here at least. You have to be able to see beyond the mental rational. You have to be able to feel like, when I feel what's happening with me, let's just take anxiety, for example. Let's say you suffer from anxiety. You actually look at it and say, if this were something, a creature, a story, an image, a scene, what would it be? What comes to you? And then something appears. Some kind of creature doing something, or some kind of image, or some kind of memory. Okay, so you don't want to rush that, and you just want to like sit with it for a while. When you sit with it for a while and do some methods, which I probably won't have time to go into because I'm just doing an overview, you get feelings come up. Energy moves in the body, circulation happens, sensations occur because you're really not shying away from this image and you're not rationalizing it because it's not rational, it's irrational. There's something happening, it shows up as an image, you can't explain it, it's just happening. You have to sit with it, you have to work with it, you have to figure out how to integrate it. And that's where a lot of the methodology comes in, is how do you actually integrate these images? Okay, so let's just say a person does that. They drop down one level from mental, rational to mythical, imaginal. Okay, that's great. That's what we have to do for most people. But that's not the full story because, remember, I said they're still abstractive dissociative. So we have to get to something that Gebser called the magical. The magical is kind of like, it's a form of animism. Okay, it's a form of animism. It's animistic magic. And for a lot of people, this is like crossing the bridge of no return. It's very scary, and it can cause a lot of issues if you don't integrate it properly, because you're taking the energy that is trapped or representative in the mythical images, and you're actually having agency with them, which is to say you're moving them around, you're trying them on, you're inhabiting them, you're shape-shifting into them, you're doing some kind of version of like ceremonial theater, ritual art. You're actually getting to the, like, you're working with the symbols not in an abstract way, but in a material concrete. Practices like Qigong really help because you need something to ground you in the unfolding ceremonial intimacy that is going to occur when you actually try to move the mythic back into the magical, which is the body. Okay? And you're going to feel a lot of emotions, you're going to feel a lot of weird feelings, you're going to have a lot of strange dreams, you're going to be going on a real initiatory journey that most of Western culture cannot help you with, and this is a big problem. But it is, I feel like it's, just, I have to say these things because it's not simple for a lot of people to do this. You're going to realize you're in a lot of shitty relationships you shouldn't be in, you might quit your job. Structures fall down at this point in the game. That's why a lot of people fall in love with the mythical, because it's still kind of safe for the ego. It's still kind of safe for the identity you've built for yourself. You're just kind of adding some flavors to it. You're kind of becoming more sexy, mythical, symbolic, sexy. But when you bridge the gap from mythical to magical, it is fundamentally animalistic. It is primordial. You're starting to go into the underworld, the chthonic. You're starting to sort of see beyond the fetishization, the romanticization, what the mythical romanticizes things. It fantasizes to see a poetic version of reality, and it's really helpful. We need it. But When we get to the magical, it is far less, refined. It is much more gritty. There's a lot of fear involved, and you have to learn to work with fear. You have to learn to work with pain, fear, and hunger, essentially, directly, without trying to solve them. And when you get to this place, you're going to start to emergent rituals will begin to happen for your life. You'll begin to see that the mythical messages you've been getting, the symbolic messages, are actually referring to real things in reality, like water, earth, rocks, trees, movement, breathing, baths, eating food, hygiene, the thoughts that you think, patterns that you believe in. It's like you're opening up the hood of the car and you're learning how the car actually functions. You're not just glamorizing that the car works. You're actually learning to become a mechanic of the car. You're learning to actually fix the car, change the car, decide if you even want that same car anymore. Your identity might actually start to fall apart before you build it back to something that you actually want. And this process can be very scary and very destabilizing for people, which is why a lot of people don't go this route unless they're forced to. They have a near-death experience, they take too much psychedelics, or a death in the family happens, or like they get disease, or they give birth, or something really major has to happen for a lot of people to go on this journey consciously. And so let's talk about that for a second. So you have to start to take what's unconscious, the underworld, which is like the magical and below. We'll talk about what's underneath magical in a minute. But if we just imagine that there's this weird little line in the sand between mythical and magical, and sort of like what's under the mythical is the underworld, the chthonic. This is where you're making what is unconscious conscious, in the sense that you're attending to it. You're putting your attention on things consciously and deliberately, with care and with creativity, but you're not running away from it. You're actually saying, what's happening? Why do I have this image? What is it about this image? And then you're going and saying, how can I sit in my meditation or my walk or my ritual or my dance, and how can I enact this image? And what happens when I enact it? Something starts to emerge. Maybe it's a gesture, maybe it's a sound, maybe you have an image of a picture you have to paint. For people who bleed with menstruation, maybe you start to recognize you have to work with your menstrual blood as a kind of material. All sorts of things, can happen. It's just, but it gets very real. It's somewhat taboo, and you have to make this stuff deliberate. You're no longer accidentally at the whim of your pains, fears, and hungers. You're actually diving deep into the reality of why you do what you do, why you think the way you do, why your parents are the way that they are, why your ancestors gave you these gifts and those curses, like for real. Why are you being tasked with certain burdens? What are you asked to transform in this life? You're communing with the so-called other world, but you're not ascending, you're descending. You're not becoming better than other people. This is not a hierarchical model. This is an indigenous model. You're trying to become more like the earth is, and less like you have protected yourself from that. So you do these things, and then let's talk about the level sort of below the magical. Because the magical, you're using your intention, you're using your actions. Intention and actions and attention. You're using these forces, these abilities that you have to enact leverage or perform agency. You're performing agency with these forces, these elemental forces that are running through your life, that are running through your blood. I mean, it's very real what's happening here. You're starting to maybe hear ancestors or see memories that you don't remember that having because they're in the blood. So you're moving to that level, and you're still, at this level of magic, you're very interested in how you can change things. You know what I'm saying? How you can enact power in the world. This isn't bad, but it's not complete, because I haven't completely talked to you about the whole map yet. So I just want you to put a pin in it, because it's like for a lot of people, they're going to work on this level for years, maybe. But if you don't know the whole picture, you might get stuck because you're wondering why do you have to do ritual all the time? It's like at a certain point, you don't need to do ritual all the time, but you need to do it some of the time. And you need to learn when it's appropriate and when it's just a habit that you're falling into because you don't have the full picture. So below magical is something that Gebser called the archaic. Now, the archaic is really fascinating. You can think of the archaic as Paleolithic animism or Neolithic animism, Stone Age animism. This is what the Taoists would call Wu Wei, or free and easy wandering, or the meditation practice of Zhuang, which is sitting and forgetting. This is getting to a state underneath magic where it's kind of like quantum. You're kind of resting in reality. And you're able to sort of perceive freely and openly, but your preferences are sort of being dissolved. It doesn't mean that you won't still have values, ethics, and morals, but your whole ideology starts to shift when you get to the archaic, because you start to act more like an animal and less like a so-called civilized human. And you're starting to get to a place where you could actually just be and experience without having to do a whole lot of things. And it's very hard to do this in our culture. I really will say that, like, it takes a certain amount of constitutional benefit and luck. You know, it takes a certain amount of privilege to sort of have enough stability to get to this place. But it is still possible even if you don't have a lot of privilege. So I'm not trying to bar anyone from entry. It's just that I found it to be difficult to fully be in the archaic in this culture. It's very, very difficult. You have to. It's like very. You might have to go on a retreat, go to nature. You start to become much more able to rest in reality, and make choices based on instinct rather than preferences. This is more what we're getting to. So let's say a person has really practiced all of these all the time. They practice them a lot. They practice using their mind for what the mind is good for, which is to say only what the mind is good for. Inquiring, having distance, getting abstract sometimes, asking questions, making a plan. That's what the mind is good for. But then there's all these other facets. You have the mythical, the symbolic, you have the magical, the intention, the action, the sort of the place where you're like qigonging with the universe or whatever. You're actually, interacting on a sort of more non-conceptual level. And then you have this archaic where you can kind of drop even below magical, and you can just kind of be in the dream that's happening, and you just kind of let things go. You let your thoughts go. You let your preferences go. You let your habits go, and you just sort of experience what it's like to sort of exist. Let's say you did that for a while, so that you're distributing your energy amongst these 4 ways of interacting or perceiving for a long time. If you did this and all 4 of them were sort of equal, like you're not necessarily saying one is better than the other, you're actually able to work with all of them in a sort of skillful way. You have skillful means. Then you would get to what Gebser called the integral. And the integral is, obviously an integration of all 4. And he says it allows a person to sort of have diaphaneity, which is this fancy way to say when light shines through something, It's diaphanous. It's like light shining through a crystal, which they use a lot in Tibetan and metaphors in Tibetan Buddhism. Is that like the soul or the soul of God or the mind of God is like a crystal. It's like a prism, and light appears through it, and it's kind of pierces in this kind of interesting prismatic holographic way, and the clear light becomes all the colors. And that's the sort of the 10,000 things of the formed world, all the diversity of the world, the 10,000 things. That would be maybe someone who you could maybe consider enlightened, is that they are able to see through things, all these levels, magical, mythical, mental, archaic. They're able to actually drop into any of them at any time. You're able to work with all of these and have them be a cooperative interplay of energy so that you see through things, but it's not a bypass methodology. I mean, this is where words get a little stupid, because we're not talking about bypassing. We're talking about seeing through or perceiving through. And perceiving through is not merely an outward generated direction, it's also inward. We're seeing through the world. And we're able to see the world on all these different levels and realize that even those levels are just a mere fragment of the whole, and they contain the whole, because like a prism or a hologram, light shines through and refracts, but if you trace it back, it all came from one source. So that's sort of like just another way to talk about this kind of science of sort of soul cultivation. And what's the point of this? Well, there's a few points. One is that if you're a whole person and you have all these faculties, you might be able to help other people and the universe. You might be able to help the plants and animals and people. You might be able to just be more generous and helpful. And that way you can live your life regardless of what terrible things are happening, and you're still being helpful, but you're being helpful from a place of this seeing through, instead of a place of believing that you can save anybody or even save yourself, or that there's some kind of escape. Because let's face it, this is, if you really follow what I've said for the last few minutes to its conclusion, you realize a lot of this duality stuff is nonsense. And so what are we saving people from? What are we protecting them from? Are we really alive or dead? We don't fucking know. And yet there's still these horrible things happening. So we still have to not just be a bystander, but also recognize that things are coming from a single source on some level and arising into all of these diversities. And then we have to make really clever choices about how we react to it and what we do. And hopefully if you do this, you're just going to be more generous, and you're going to have boundaries and you're going to be generous, and you're going to have boundaries and you're going to be generous. I mean, it's, whatever. The other goal maybe, or the other result of this methodology. So that's the method of living in the material world, right? You live in the material world, you try to be as generous as possible, and you try to see through things for what they might really be, and you use these methods to kind of sift reality, and you're just in it, and that's it. The other method is it's how do you die? Many traditions believe that all of this life is a preparation for the adventure or the initiation of death. So you would do all this so that when death starts to come, you have a real tool belt in your consciousness, your awareness, your attention, your perception, your consciousness, your awareness is able to travel the path of dying in such a way that is like a harm reduction method, right? It's a harm reductive method of transformation. And there's all sorts of beliefs about reincarnation and the 50 million hells and all the other things. And it's those may or may not be true, but it's not really the point. The point is something's going to happen. We call it dying. Something is happening. Some kind of transformation is occurring, some kind of navigation is occurring, and what we think of as ourselves, our ego, our consciousness, our personality, is going to go on that fucking journey. And we want to be somewhat prepared so that we don't just freak out when it's happening. And we can actually cultivate chi and energy and goodwill so that as we're dying, we're actually enjoying the process because we have all these tools. Okay? So that's a very brief, it's a very brief singular framework. There are more frameworks that I use along with this in my work that I do with people. But this is like, I still have to onboard people with this because there is the navigation of going from mental to mythical to magic to archaic and not thinking you're getting better, but that you're exploring different faculties that you have access to. Some are going to be easier for some people than others, but that's not really the point, because everyone has a multitude of obstructions that they are like saddled with that will cause them to fall into some version of an addictive pattern, some kind of resistant pattern, some kind of procrastination pattern, some kind of violent domineering pattern, some kind of codependent pattern, because doing this work is scary, and it's supposed to be scary. And even if we lived in a decolonial state or a decolonial place, it would still be scary to do what I'm saying here. Fear, pain, and desire or hunger has always been part of the process of initiation, and initiation is not merely like a single-use event. Initiation is an ongoing apprenticeship with reality, all of reality, including all the things you don't like. And it gets you real and honest and direct, and it's kind of ruthless, and it kind of doesn't care about your feelings and preferences. And that's why a lot of people don't do it, and that's why a lot of healing work doesn't work at a certain point, because you can heal all your traumas and still be highly colonized. Like it doesn't work to get beyond a certain mental rational state. Even a lot of somatic work that we see today is really not allowing people to go this deep, because it's really hard to be a person on this path in this culture, because the culture makes you poor if you do this. Like, it's very real that, like, this is not a popular thing that I'm saying. It's not popular because we're in a competitive situation. We are competing with each other all the time for resources, for status. And so this work is to get us to a place of wisdom where we can actually see that competition for what it really is and hopefully die without regrets and grudges. But we might die very, very destitute and poor. There are very, very many real medicine people that die in broken down trailers and reservations. Like, it's just the way it is. It's fucked up. And they die without getting their flowers. They die without the recognition they actually have earned from the world, from other people. And their practice should be such that they would die in that state of poverty and destitution in a way that they could actually leave with a breath of fresh air, with relief. This touches on everything that's going on, whether you want to believe it or not. There's nothing that's not, there's everything that's happening. Every fucked up thing that's happening, the constant war machine, profiteering, human trafficking, genocide. This is a crucible that we're constantly going through because the human race hasn't figured out how to come toward a mixed space of indigenous knowledge. That's it. like a wisdom tradition that actually functions and isn't a cult. Like, we haven't figured out how to do that, so instead that we have the cult of money and power and domination. That's the last 10,000 years, right? But hopefully this talk sort of give you a framework. It give you a little framework. I can't give everything. I'm still struggling to figure out how to put my message out there so that I can just make the minimum I need to pay my medical bills, realizing that it might not happen and I might just have to retire because I can't really play this competition game. I can't really keep fighting. And the other issue is that, like, there's so many people want this work. They say they want this work, or they say they want to help, and they don't. And this is the hardest part of doing this work, is you start to realize people bite off more than they can chew, and they lie to themselves about what they're actually capable of. They aren't willing to do whatever Creator asks them to do. They aren't willing to go the distance. And that means that you have to really solidify your integrity and your determination to do this work, because you might encounter a harder time in a different way by doing this work, but you will have a more of a sense of reality. You won't be such a liar anymore. But it doesn't mean your life will be easier in certain ways. It might be harder in certain ways. And you can't fantasize or romanticize out of it. You can't go love and light. You can't do this thing that people are doing with, like, manifestation and laws of attraction and all this stuff. It just is not how it works. When you're really doing the thing that I'm talking about, you are just challenged every day by reality, by your own soul. You are just challenged. It is not a purely pleasure practice. This is all baby nonsense, from my opinion. I'm not saying that you can't have pleasure doing this work. In fact, a large degree of how far you're willing to go is based on how much you can learn to enjoy it. How much joy do you let yourself experience so that when the challenges hit you, you actually don't retreat into some kind of addiction spiral or codependency trap, but you're actually able to enjoy the challenge and go, wow, this is a challenge. Okay, so what do I got to do about it? And then go back to the practice using all the capacities that you have to sort of look at the challenge in different ways: mental, mythic, magical, and archaic, right? Yeah. So if you wonder why, and this will be the last thing I say today, if you wonder why you're so confused all the time, and why people seem so fucking confused and hypocritical and just like unhinged, and why you are also unhinged, and why you feel so ineffective and powerless and helpless, there's a reason for that. One is that it's manufactured by the society for you to feel confused and helpless and traumatized. Traumatized people are easier to kill, enslave, and control. It's simple. The other is that you don't have the correct worldview. I didn't grow up thinking this way. No one taught me this stuff when I was a kid. I had to learn through trials and tribulations how my ideology, my worldview, was wrong. That's a very humbling process, to realize how fucking wrong you are about so many things. And so most people don't want to go on that journey to find a better worldview that actually more accurately reflects reality. And so if you're constantly confused, running around, it's like, yeah, when you have the wrong worldview, the results are pretty predictable. You will always come up against them. You will always encounter them until you're able to find how it is that you have sort of created that issue through a wrong perception, wrong sight, wrong seeing, wrong hearing, wrong sensing. How your perception and sensations and how you perceive information and data and relationships, how that's been colonized. And it feels bad. It feels really bad. And you're like, and then you can go into another spiral about how fucking bad and how ashamed you feel and never get anywhere, because there's a lot to deal with when you realize that your worldview is wrong. Because I'm also not asking you to become like a cult follower. No one needs any of that shit. We need people who are thinking on all these levels, and they're working and they're challenging themselves and they're being challenged. And so if you don't like this and you'd rather I just talk about breathing, I don't know what to tell you, because it sucks that some people are going to be at that breathing stage for a long, long time. They're going to be at the sort of like purely somatic, everyone wants to read My Grandmother's Hands and thinks it's like the best thing ever, but they can't get any farther than just like talking about intergenerational trauma. It's not, like I've read all the books too. It's like there's stuff that's real that's not in books, because no one really wants to read those books. So just recognize you can get somewhere with what is being taught to you in a capitalist society about healing and psychotherapy and somatic healing and stuff. You can get somewhere. You can definitely get somewhere. And what I'm doing with my own life and trying to help people who also are on a certain kind of path is to go deeper than what is acceptable in the modern society. And it's not because what we're doing is necessarily wrong. It's just that when you do it to a certain level, capitalism is not going to like you. You become kind of ungovernable. You become unlikable. People find reasons to hate you. And that's just rough. And so it's like a pain path sometimes. It's like a study of pain, to get through pain and ally with pain. And I'm not saying I'm masochistic, because I'm not masochistic. And I don't think anyone needs to be masochistic. But what I've learned from my life and what the spirits and the ancestors have told me and taught me and sort of slapped me across my face 1,000 times is that I can tell the truth and I can share, and I can't expect any reward from it. And that's really hard, because we all want to be fucking rewarded, right? So if you just want the breathing stuff, I made that video for you. But if you're thinking that maybe actually getting some help in dealing with what's really happening in your soul, that's the actual work I do in private sessions. It's like, yes, you're going to have to be told some of the basics, but I personally am not a basics guy, in the sense that, like, I'm not interested in you just having a pacifier. I'm not interested in just pacifying the issue. Obviously, that's part of it, but then we have to go more than that. There has to be more than that. And that's where all the clown work comes in. That's where the performance work comes in, the decolonial theater arts, the meditation, the ritual, and all that stuff, so that you can actually engage with what's happening, not just pacify it. That's not what we're trying to do. Anyway, that's it for today. That's it for today. Blessings to all beings. May all beings be well. May all our relations be well. Hopefully all of the problems that we're seeing, the really atrocious genocides, will end, but they may not. As a descendant of some of the people that, one of the many people that tried to be, that were attempted to be genocided, it's a rough scene. It kind of never stops. And you can call your representatives and protest in the street, and I think that that's a good idea for some people. I think that we need to strike. I think that the auto workers need to strike. So blessings to all the workers on strike. Blessings to all the revolutionaries, the Zapatistas, the indigenous land back movement. Blessings to all the people that are fighting for reality and the earth. And blessings to all those people that are possessed by evil and stupidity and ignorance, and hope they get what they need to stop doing what they're doing, because they are creating massive bucket loads of stuff that we have to deal with. And it's not easy. It's not going to be easy to deal with it. But it can be dealt with. And we start, at least in my estimation, we each have to start with dealing with what we've been given, so that then we can help others deal with what they've been given, whether they like it or not. Because it ain't fair. This isn't about fairness. Life is not fair. This reality is not fair. And yet, here we are. So what are we going to do? With that being said, blessings to everyone who's watching. Thanks for entertaining my words today. Thank you.